Welcome to our webinar on supporting LGBTQ athletes when they come out on your team. I'm Sid Ziegler from Outsports. We're thrilled to co-present this with GoSpace and Equality Coaching Alliance. Moderating the conversation today is going to be Kirk Walker, who is a trailblazing coach at UCLA, softball coach who has been a huge part of the movement toward LGBTQ inclusion in sports for the last 15 years, and who also runs ECA and Go. So Kirk, why don't you just take it away?
Well, thank you, and I appreciate Outsports working together with us to bring together this great topic with some amazing panelists. So I'm very, very pleased and excited to introduce three of our panelists here that two of them that I know really well and one of them that's in my conference. So I feel pretty close and connected to all of them. But Amanda Scott joins us. She is currently the head coach at UMSL. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Amanda. Amanda was a national champion at Fresno State. I've actually watched Amanda play since she was about 16. Back in the day when we did in-home visits, I did get to do an in-home visit with her. Unfortunately, she chose Fresno State. For me, fortunate for her because she went on to be a four-time All-American and win a national title in 1998. Led the country in ERA 2 years in a row. So an amazing athlete. But Amanda, I want you to tell us a little bit about your coaching journey. That was a little bit about your playing journey, but tell us where you've been coaching-wise.
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me. And everyone should know that back when I played, UCLA was the ultimate four-letter word. So glad that Kirk and I could put that behind us. I have had an interesting path. I started coaching at Michigan State pretty much right out of school. At the time, I wanted to try it to make sure I didn't want to do it rather than really feeling a strong pull to it. And I loved it. I loved the student-athlete mentorship. At the time, I really hadn't seen snow fall from the sky, born and raised Californian, so thought I'd head back west. I worked for Jackie Joseph, Michigan State, and then got a call from Gail Blevins at Iowa, two legends. I went to Iowa, learned very quickly I was not a corn and cow woman, so started spending some time in Chicago. I then moved to Chicago and spent about 12 years there, and really have gotten a little bit smaller at each university I've coached at. I was at UIC for a couple years and then started the softball program from scratch at Roosevelt University. It's an NAIA program in Chicago. Loved it. And then at the time, my sister coaches at the University of Arkansas. I started making the trip from Chicago to Arkansas and found myself smack dab in the middle of St. Louis. And getting ready to start my 5th year at UMSL, and we are a D2 athletic program here in St. Louis in the GLVC conference. And I really feel like I've found my sweet spot here. I love the D2 level. I love everything it has to offer. And so I guess that's my coaching journey.
Awesome.
It has a little bit of everything. So thanks, Kirk.
That's fantastic. And I planned on talking about Courtney, obviously your sister who was an All-American as well at Cal and coaching the SEC. So coaching in your family is something you guys do well as playing. So pleased to have you here. Doshia Woods joins us. She is coming from being an assistant for the last 10 years at Tulane University. And I will gladly announce, since it's public notice now, that she is now the new head coach, women's basketball coach at the University of Denver. And very excited for that opportunity for her and look forward to that happening. So I got the chance to work with Doshia when we were both at Oregon State. We became very close. And unfortunately, it was only 3 years that we were coaching at the same time. Doshia also has had stints at her alma mater at Western Illinois. She coached at New Mexico State for a year and then moved on to Tulane where she was there for 10 years. So she has been an amazing icon in women's basketball and everyone knows Doshia. Super excited to have her here. Her coaching pedigree is amazing and excited for this to be your first public event as a head coach. But Doshia, tell us a little bit about your playing background, where you grew up playing, the sports you played, and kind of a little bit about that side.
Oh, for sure. Well, you left out University of Missouri, just my 2-year stint when I left Oregon State. Just wanted to throw that in there for any of those players that might be watching. But I am from Kansas originally. I went to, as I say, the only high school in town. There's 7, but everybody knows the only one is Topeka High. Then from there, I went to Barton County Community College, played there, and then went to play at Western Illinois after that. And, I remember on my recruiting visit when I left Great Bend and Macomb were very similar, and Houston was my other official visit. And so people always make fun of me, like, how do you pick Macomb over Houston? But, I love Great Bend. I probably would have stayed at JUCO if he would have let me. But I loved all 4 years in college, both years at Barton and both years at Western. Probably the most successful year was 29-2. And I think when you think back to what we do as coaches, I'll never forget after my freshman year, coach says in the locker room, congratulations, you now have the worst record in program history. We were like 15-16. So when we responded the next year, we were 29-2. It was just like such a great feeling just to be able to respond that way. But other sports that I played, I actually played softball. I was supposed to do both at Barton actually, but I had a passion for basketball and I liked softball. I did volleyball 4 years in high school and then did track for a couple of years. So I've always kind of been really into sports. And then my time at Oregon State, I actually did intramural soccer, indoor soccer, and try to stay active that way. Not as active as I want to be now because I'm getting older. Won't say my age, but yeah. So I've always been pretty active in sports, and basketball definitely is where my passion is.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dosh, and super excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Imran Malik, coaching. He is the head coach at Arizona State University. He coaches the men's and women's crew team, as well as the, the Tempe, what are we called here? The Tempe, help me out, Tempe Junior Crew program, right? And that's obviously a developmental program there. So he's coaching all 3 levels, both men's and women's, and brings a lot of experience there. He started coaching at a junior college, as a junior. He started coaching a club program, and then as he graduated, was hired to be the head coach at Arizona State. He rode for 3 years at Arizona State and has obviously been pretty stable there in Arizona and Phoenix in the desert. And Imran, tell me a little bit. We know about rowing is crew, and you're in a boat and you're rowing, but I think a lot of people don't understand the dynamics of a team. You've got a really large roster. Tell us the numbers that you have on your roster. And then you have a lot of smaller teams within that large roster, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that dynamic?
Yes. First of all, hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here. So rowing is pretty dynamic in all sorts of aspects. Obviously, you have, both junior, collegiate, and masters rowing, and men and women for the 2 separate teams as well. But with that being said, you have different categories, whether you are an open weight or a lightweight rower, or you're a varsity or novice rower, say your first year or something like that. But, we also have many boat classes that we train in, such as 8s, which is what you primarily see as the big ones in the Olympic rowing, going down to 4s and quads, pairs and doubles, and singles. So, yes, you can be rowing in a single or you can be rowing in an 8, but regardless of if you're rowing alone or with 8 other people, you're part of the same team and you represent the same team. So I'm happy to be a part of rowing and coaching in Arizona and helping it, become a force that and helping it grow here in the state. And I'm, very happy to continue on with this career. So.
That's awesome. Well, you bring a great perspective, obviously coaching men and women, but also coaching a large team, but also those individual boats are individual small teams of themselves. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Look forward to hearing about that. Obviously very pleased to have our other panelist on board here, Jeremy Bennett. He is the head football coach at Mullen High School in Denver. It's his first year. You were just hired, right, in February, right? So you haven't played a season yet there.
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah, he comes to Mullen from where he spent 11 years. Is that right? 15 years
15.
As the head coach at D'Eveline, and amassed a record of 103 and 56 and 11 playoff appearances. It's incredibly impressive. Friday Night Lights, right? With movies and television series have been made about it all over, and all kinds of great stories and human interest stories, and all centered around Friday Night Lights. So we're super excited to have you here and be able to kind of bring that perspective, obviously. And but tell us a little bit about your playing background. Obviously, we see your coaching record, but tell us a little bit about how you got involved in football and playing.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I grew up with a single mom, and athletics was my babysitter growing up. So I grew up playing football, wrestling. I started in judo, U.S. Federation judo at a very early age. I still compete in judo in the Masters division now as I'm quite a bit older. But I grew up in Louisville, Colorado, right outside of Boulder. Went to Centaurus High School, where I played football, wrestled, and ran track and through shot and disc on the track team, as well as competing in judo. I played at Western State College in which is now Western State University in Gunnison, Colorado. Was going to throw there as well, but just focused on football. After my junior year, I had a pretty serious knee injury. Kind of limped through my senior year, and that's kind of where my coaching career started. I GA'd at my alma mater for a season, and then moved right into the high school football ranks with coaching track, wrestling, and football. So I just finished my 24th year as a high school coach in Jefferson County, and that's really about it. Had 2-year stint in the Arena Football League, and high school is where it's at, because I think we can affect kids before we send them on to these great coaches at the collegiate level. Well,
thank you, Jeremy, and my kudos to you for 24 years at the high school level. That's amazing. And I will kind of add, if this is true or not, you hired a female assistant coach to be your running backs coach. Is that right?
I did. Adriana Martinez. She's a phenomenal football coach, and I can tell you this. We got a little question about it, and I said, you want to sit down on the chalkboard with her, feel free, but just give me a signal when you feel silly, when you don't know a tenth of what she does about the game of football. So Adriana was a very competitive softball player. She was a phenomenal pitcher here in the state of Colorado and had a big bat. And I coached her brother. I would not allow her brother on my coaching staff, I could tell you that, but I'll take Adriana any day. So this will be the second year she's been with me, a year at Devlin, and now she's with me at Mullen High School.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Really quickly, I just want to touch on really quickly and explain what GoSpace and ECA are for people out there that may not know. GoSpace is a digital community based on Facebook for LGBT student athletes at the high school and collegiate level. We have over 900 members, current and former student athletes. And if people have interest in that, they certainly can reach out to me as well. Equality Coaches Alliance, we're actually looking to pass the 1,000 mark here in the next probably 2 weeks. And it's an amazing organization of coaches and sports professionals that work at the high school, collegiate, professional, and at the Olympic international level as well. So excited for those two groups to be growing and expanding. And that's kind of why we're here. That's what we're going to talk about is LGBT individuals in sport, and mainly our student athletes. And it's an interesting dialogue. I'll open up with this. We've always assumed, or we've heard that there's 8 to 10% of our population probably identify as LGBT. But, back during the Obama administration, the CDC actually did the study of 25 and younger. And they found that actually that number was of LGB individuals self-identified was closer to 15% of our population in that age group. And 1% in that age group identified as transgender or non-conforming gender identity. So it tells us a lot. There's a lot of individuals in our youth that self-identify. We know that sports and we know that athletics and LGBT identity and are not correlated at all. So we know that those numbers are probably pretty similar in sport as well. But let's talk about this, because we have a lot less athletes than that coming out. While we have a lot of athletes coming out, we know that there are a lot more out there that are not. And I think this is the dialogue that we can start having about how we can create a better situation, a better culture on all of our teams and our campuses to hopefully allow student athletes to be truly authentic and be themselves. So let's get into that conversation. And I posed this first question specifically to Amanda and Jeremy. Both of you have some very unique experiences, obviously, with working with a trans athlete in your programs. And obviously, that's something that's even more unique than just an LGBT athlete. So tell us a little bit about kind of how that whole process started. Either one of you go first. Amanda, if you want to go first with your experience with your trans athlete.
There we go. Yeah, so I've actually had interaction with 2 trans athletes in my career, and the first was at Michigan State, which feels like 100 years ago, and certainly in a different time of the world. And so at that time, the athlete conversations were just being had, and I just remember feeling the need to create a space where those were welcomed and someone would listen, right? So that was just, and that was, I think, 2003, so a really long time. From then till now. When I got to UMSL, I'm getting ready to start my 5th year, I was on my on-campus interview, pulled out my chair at dinner, and the AD said, well, I'm not sure if we've told you or not, but we have a transgender athlete in the department and he plays softball. And I just was like, wait, what? I need to just know everything about it. And that was it. I just absorbed it. I just wanted to absorb and understand and hear it. He was getting ready to start his senior season. And so, you know, it was a weird timing when I got the job because they had already kind of started school. And so a lot of, most of the team members had sent, you know, an email or text or something. And he had sent an email and explained pronouns. And then I'm not sure if you know, but you won't say she's going to take grounders. You're going to say he's going to take grounders. And, you know, it seemed so simple. And I just remember feeling like, man, I just want to create the best experience, be a part of it. And that's it. I want this kid to know that I am so far on board. There's no gray about it. So, and then that's what I did. I looked right at him and I said, I support the shit out of you in this, whatever you need, but you're going to have to tell me what it is you need and just know that I'm here and we're going to do it. And I just stayed real casual about it. I wanted, again, like I said, him to know undeniably that this was a non-issue. And then just really worked to stay present in my behaviors, my thoughts, and just the awareness. And one thing I always say is that I didn't expect at the time was I felt super protective. Like, you know, not only in like, oh, these are my, 19 players away from their parents and your phone's on and you pray it doesn't ring at night. Not like that, just in a way that was like, I wanted to have this like little safety barrier, constantly preparing for the unexpected negative, response, look, comment, whatever it was. The culture here was exceptional. It was like nothing I could have ever imagined. And so I would say that my athlete would say it was a very seamless, and thank God, right? I mean, I think his teammates were fantastic, but I think I learned a lot about myself as a person and about the type of coach I want to continue to be and the things that are important to make that happen for whatever comes up, right? So whatever it is, we face some really hard things here across the board, social issues. This was a big one. And I want him to always feel proud that he was here. So it has to be something that continues over time that makes people feel comfortable. So I don't know. I mean, Jeremy, you pick up on that, but there's a lot of moving parts that we can get into as well.
Yeah,
sure.
we'll certainly, we're going to delve into some specifics and some different things for sure, but that's great. Thank you, Amanda. And obviously, Jeremy, yours was a little bit different situation. Was an athlete that was it trying out? Is that right?
Yeah.
And maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, he really wanted to play football. And I will tell you, first of all, I think kind of like Amanda, I was more, okay, what do I do? I don't want to do it wrong. And fortunately for me, I have a very good friend of mine and someone that I coached for, Micah Porter, who I could go to because, and I will say this now, and this is not to be degrading at all, but I said, Micah, she, and he goes, he. And I said, she, and he goes, he. And so just those first steps, understanding, and I went, oh, that's right. And for me, it was eye-opening because he he went to school in an academic and in an environment that wasn't inviting for this. And I thought, I was so nervous. Am I going to do anything wrong? In that protective, like Amanda said, I want to protect. I want to make sure that he's taken care of. And you know, I was so proud to have the opportunity. And then I stopped and thought to myself, why am I so nervous? Because he's not. And it was more of a me issue. And he really helped me through it. Like, hey, coach, everything's okay. And I've always lived by the motto that our student athletes all have their own thumbprint, right? No one's exactly alike. And this was no different. This was new to me, but it wasn't any different than someone with a single mom or maybe someone who lived with grandparents. It was just different. His thumbprint was different. So I really started to just look into how I could support. And it was very important to me that he felt welcome. And all these things I worried about, though, they never happened. He just fit right in. He worked his tail off. And at the end of the day, it wasn't for him. He said, Coach, I appreciate the opportunity. I think I want to go another direction. But he put, you know, a solid summer worth of everyday lifting and football drills. I think I was more educated than he was. And I think for me, that was the first time in my life where I just said, wow, we really have to be careful of young people and make sure they're supported and make sure that we're here for them, because there's a mental health aspect at the high school level, especially, that they need to know that we love them. And I love you exactly the same as I love everybody else. And I support you. And so it opened my eyes to it. And now that I have that situation, I see it and I can see the kids and I can, you know, so for me, it was a learning process. I'm still learning. And, but it kind of brought my coaching full circle, or at least to where I need to close the circle. And it was an experience that I'll never forget. And he'll always have a part of that. And he's always going to be a part of me furthering my education and becoming a better coach. So for awesome. That, I'll always say thanks. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeremy. And I applaud your efforts and your ability to have open arms and open mind. One of the things that I know, the story of both of you guys in telling your stories about this, was your fear of making a mistake, your fear of saying the wrong pronoun and those things really in the beginning, and that how your athletes actually really kind of helped you kind of in that process. And I appreciated that, because we as coaches always want to be perfect, right? We want to have all the answers. We want to do it right. We want to be the example. And yet we have to have the ability to know that we're going to mess up, and it's going to happen. But I think that's important for people to know, that nobody knows how to do it perfectly. It's just doing it with the right intent and with the right open heart. That's great. We're more to come, obviously, with our trans athletes. Imran, tell us a little bit. You've obviously had a really unique situation, and you shared a little bit on a call earlier where you were talking about the environment that you had. You were not out to your athletes when you were first as coaching, and you had an assistant coach that was kind of creating a little bit of a hostile environment, and it kind of put you in a difficult situation. Can you talk a little bit about the value and the importance of language from the leaders and from coaches, and kind of what you learned early on about that in your coaching career?
So actually, no, this was more recently, so I was more out to my athletes. But I had an assistant coach that was blatantly homophobic around the boathouse and our facilities and around the team. So this was at the collegiate level. And there were a lot of instances where, specifically towards the men, if they weren't meeting up to his standards and they were not going fast enough, he would, say, "You're not fast enough, you're gay," or "You're the F word, don't roll like a girl." Things that had that sort of anti-gay stigma attached to it. So it took me a while to approach how to handle that, because I was, one, caught off guard, because one, being an openly gay coach, how could someone that I work with be so comfortable using these gay slurs around me and also some athletes that were out at the time. So one thing as a coach and a leader is that we need to understand is that we need to call these things out right when it happens. It took me a little bit of time to call them out. to say, you know, you shouldn't be saying these things, they're offensive to me and to some people on the team, and they're just derogatory terms that you shouldn't be saying. So, you know, really it is just our job as leaders to make sure that we tackle these things the second they happen, because we want to create that open and inclusive environment so that people don't feel like they are discriminated against on the team by their own leaders and coaches.
Right. And you even had mentioned that you had athletes that were quitting the team and weren't being around the program because they just, whether they be gay themselves or just felt like it wasn't a healthy situation.
Yeah, they felt like, I'm sorry. Yeah, they felt like it wasn't a good environment for them, and they ultimately quit. And some of them have started to reach out, wanting to return again. But it felt like felt like I didn't do my job as a head coach and as a queer man. You know, I didn't, you know, create that safe space right from the start. I kind of let it happen before I was able to formulate the right things to say.
Yeah. Well, I think it's powerful, obviously, for us as leaders to always make sure we're keeping that standard high with our coaches and our athletes, because if we don't, then who knows what's going to happen. Doshia, I want to kind of talk a little bit about, you've obviously coached at a number of different places. Women's athletics and women's basketball in general has worked really hard for decades to try and kind of nullify the presence of potentially lesbians in sport, because everyone was assumed a lesbian if they were in sports, right? We know that's not true, but there was a concerted effort in women's athletics for a long time to really kind of, qualify that and really kind of eliminate that. Over the last few years, have you seen your athletes call out your coaches or see that your athletes are farther along than maybe the coaches in that generation that we're all in? When it comes to being out and being maybe visible?
You know, and I don't know if it's because it's my time here in New Orleans, I feel like everybody lives comfortable. We don't have, especially if you go the last 3-4 years, haven't really had the group that says, oh, coach, I'm this, and just, you know, come out, I think, just living, right, and just kind of living by example. They are definitely comfortable talking about just very matter of fact. That's probably how I would say this last 3-4 years, they're just very matter of fact about who they are. And it's not a lot of explaining. I remember 10 years ago or earlier when I got here, had a young lady wanted to kind of come out. And so I said, oh, you're gay? She's like, no, why you got to put the labels? And so she kind of came at me. And I think that's what I've learned, especially about this generation, is we are probably so quick to put a label. This is how I identify. And if that's you, great. But my experience, especially the last few years, has been they don't really necessarily want the label. They just want to live. And how I'm living right now, if that's, you know, happens to be with the girl or happens to be with the guy, they just want the freedom to be and almost to explore. We're still this last step, especially in college, before adulthood, where they can kind of be a kid. You know, most of us coach college here. It's like, I'm not quite grown up yet, but like in this moment, I want to be an adult. So they act like that. But then the next moment, it's like, you know, they can't return a text. So I feel like they still are, you know, there still is this last step before adulthood where they can do that. And that's what I kind of appreciate about some that want the title and they are super open about this is what I am. And then others it's like they enjoy the freedom to just explore. And again, I can't say this would be the same if I was in another city, but New Orleans, definitely, we have a very just kind of unique environment with the team. And there's I wouldn't say there's not a lot of need to say, oh, coach, this is what I am. It's, you know, this is what I have. I feel like I have the freedom to do and how I have the freedom to love. And if that happens to be, you know, same sex, then they don't really feel uncomfortable. They are pretty private though, too. I'm shocked by how private they are as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we all are experiencing this. Obviously, we're coaching, and many have been coaching for a long time here. In many ways, this generation is way ahead of us and is holding us to a higher standard in many, many ways when it comes to this issue and a lot of social justice issues. Let's face it, right? And that's, I think, something that we as coaches have to continue to push our boundaries because we're being held to a higher standard by our student athletes, I think, on some of these social justice issues. That being
one thing I want to add is, like, I just respect how they just, you know, sometimes we feel like we have to qualify everything that we do and say all the time, and they just live. They just live, and they're very comfortable in their own skin and understanding in some ways more than some of us adults that it changes. It's like this whole ebb and flow, and they're comfortable living that way and kind of navigating that space.
Yeah. Yeah, and that being said, we also know that there is a large portion of people that are struggling, that do have a hard time with their identity, and there's potentially a lot of effects with that. The coming out process, there's a lot of pressures and anxieties and fears for our athletes, and depending on the culture or the environment that they're in, that can really play a toll on them. Anybody this is open for anybody that has some thoughts, that have coached or watched a student athlete really kind of spiraling in a negative way, and what kind of came out of it was, once they kind of came out, or when they did come out to you, it kind of released a lot of that anxiety and pressure, and you might have seen a whole different kind of an athlete. Has anybody experienced that or seen that with some of the athletes over the years?
I'll go. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy. You beat me.
No, I was just gonna say, we still I watched one of my athletes spiral out of control, and unfortunately, to this day, with all the support we've given him, he's still spiraling out of control. And he graduated from high school and went on to play at college. Was actually expelled from college and got into some trouble there. And he's just really a lost soul right now. And we've tried to reach him and to let him know it's okay. Whatever you're feeling is okay, and we're here to support you. And so I would like to say that he has. He's come out of the backside of it and he's okay. But that pressure's still there. And I think that pressure is from all facets, right? He was a phenomenal football player, and well, I'm a football player, I can't be gay, which we know is not the case at all. And then a home life with a very strong old school Christian values. And I think he struggles there. And, I had dinner with him about a month and a half ago, and I was just hoping to see something that I didn't see yet. So he's a work in progress. And again, my good friend, and which I would say a mentor now, Michael Porter, we've talked at length at several times about this young man, and I hope he gets it figured out. I really do. And I hope he becomes comfortable with who he is. I think Coach Woods said it best, that for the most part, these kids are comfortable in their own skin and who they are, but he's still struggling. So that, it's not the success story you're looking at on the backside, but I'm still watching this young man who's a phenomenal young man spiraling kind of out of control. And so not the point you wanted at all, but I have had that athlete, and I still have that athlete, because when my athletes, when they graduate and they move on, they're still my athletes. I still love them. I still care about them. And we want to continue to work with them and have those relationships. So I'm hoping to learn something today. What I get to take back to this young man and say, hey, whatever it is. But so I've had that athlete, and as a 24-year-old, he's still struggling. So
yeah. Amanda, you were going to say.
Yeah, so I have one athlete that's coming to mind in particular from my last job. And, I hate to make general comments, about women in college, but, what we try to do across the board is pay attention to consistencies, right? So, because you could relate these to sexuality, to booze, to mental health, to any of these things, right? And when things stop being normal, consistent, it's like, okay, let's look at these outside factors here. And with this particular athlete, she was, kind of very self-sufficient. She had to be, and she found herself in a great circle of friends, but she started dating a girl at the same school, and she isolated herself rather than saying, this is what's happening. And so then the other good buds, were getting offended that she didn't want to hang out with them anymore. And so now we got this and we got this. And meanwhile, this kid's just trying to figure out her path and what this is. So I honestly don't even particularly remember her like literally coming out in the conversation. It was just trying to engage in the dialogue to make sure she knew she could if she needed to. And regardless, let's just talk about what's going on here. School's not going well. You seem a little disconnected at softball. And so is there anything you want to talk about? And then in related news is talking to her closest people about healthy ways to have conversations and not just ice her out because your feelings are hurt, And there was a couple moving parts there in terms of sexuality, in terms of just her upbringing that was different from the other girls in the group. But I will say that eventually she got there, and then pretty soon everybody hung out together. And it's like,
did we really need to spend 4 months, like, you know, talking in all these circles? But we did, right? And that's the process. And some get there faster. But I think when you start to notice those little things across the board, you have to really look at what has changed, or what feels hard here, and just try to do the work, and then have that comfortable situation where you just kind of pose open-ended questions and see if it comes out. And regardless, eventually it's going to, or something's going to be connected enough to get the kid on a healthier path to then feel confidence to kind of have the true coming out and engage, you know, like they normally would.
Yeah, that's awesome. Imran, you have an example of a young athlete that came out, actually I think came out as trans, if I remember correctly, and kind of talk a little bit about how that went when you kind of were, either he was sharing with the team or you shared it with the team. How did that kind of go, and what was the process you saw?
Yeah, so the process is actually, you know, from the moment I met this athlete, you know, every now and then they would give me a small inkling that they were not living their truth and that they were not feeling comfortable with the way that they were perceived by others. You know, small conversations like, I really want to row with the boys, or I really want to be in that boat, just things that they wanted but couldn't see themselves being a part of. It wasn't until this athlete who I talked to, I think it was last November or something like that, he was dealing with some very hard stuff at home, and it was affecting his performance at practice. And I talked to him on the side. I said, you know, you don't have to tell me what's going on, but I just want to let you know that, you know, I'm here for you no matter what, regardless of what it is. And whatever your journey it may be, you know, it's your journey. So whenever you feel comfortable to talk to me or to anyone, I'm here, and we're here for you. So it was little conversations like that. And it wasn't until January when this athlete, who was only 14, a freshman in high school, came up to me and told me that he wants to be called a different name, and he wants to go by the he, him pronouns. And so I said, that's great. And he said that he was really nervous about, you know, approaching it to the team. And I said, you know what, you can, you're going to do this on your own when you feel comfortable. I'm not going to force this on you, but just know that I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that we have an open and accepting environment. And if something is wrong, that we're going to make sure we handle it. And it was literally the next day where at the end of practice, he announced to the team, he said, hey guys, I really want to be called this name and use the he, him pronouns. And there was no question. This kid is only 14 years old, and to feel comfortable enough to say that to his teammates, who, you know, are all high school kids, it was very inspiring. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from that was maybe a couple minutes after that, some of the boys said, well, now you can row in our boat now. And it was just really cool how, you know, high school kids today were so willing and open to accepting that, like, without a question.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Kurt,
You
I
know,
want to
we're,
just add, like, the religious piece, you know, dealing with athletes that come out. I know a lot of us, I know Coach Scott or Coach Bennett mentioned it earlier, just the religious piece that some of these athletes face. And there's a couple, I remember watching a Fish Out of Water, I think was a documentary that I've shared with a couple athletes. And I think for them, it's they were seen on the team as kind of this religious leader, so to speak. They're either organized in Bible studies, and they start to kind of figure out their own sexuality and how do I now address that, and almost feeling like this whole, like, you know, hypocrite and things like that, and almost forcing you to choose love or the Bible. And I think having some resources handy that you can kind of share with your athletes, just to kind of give them an idea that they're not alone, but that religious piece is such a huge piece that a lot of people, a lot of us in the community kind of deal with, and you have to navigate that. And I think also for the athletes, because most of them, especially your high school or just getting to college, are still dealing with their parents, and just that's all they've known for so long that they start to experience this. But being able to equip yourself with those type of resources to share just kind of help that process, because that religious piece is always hard to fully overcome, especially when you first start feeling these feelings yourselves.
Well, that's amazing, Doshia. That's awesome. And that leads us kind of to the next question that I had for the group. And anyone, what are some of the resources that, knowing what you know now, you've all gone through the process with different athletes coming out. What are some of the resources that you think were most valuable for any coach that's going to deal with this that maybe hasn't yet? And I will say this, whether you yourself identify as LGBT or straight, it can be as uncomfortable for both type of coaches. Just because you are LGBT doesn't mean that this becomes easy when an athlete comes out to you. So what are some of the resources that are out there, either on your campuses or in general, that you feel like you want to share?
So we're real big advocates for the counseling center for a number of things. And I always just tell them, I'm like, hey, if you were having a hard time with your curveball, I wouldn't send you to the health center to have them talk about the curveball. So coming in here and talking to me about something that's not my wheelhouse, I will help you, but let me connect you with someone who's professional at this. They tend to freak out about the counseling center or seeing a therapist. And so I think it's just consistency over time of just mentioning it and slowly getting there, while also creating the openness in your office or in your staff to continue the dialogue so it doesn't stop. So not like I'm not wiping my hands of it. I'm in it, I'm here for it, but let's look at this. Or it may be something, let me find you something off campus that feels safer. And it may, we're in a community here where we have a number of different colleges. So finding a college group that may feel safer for our student athletes to get off our campus, but go and be in a safe space with, similar individuals. I want to kind of relate something that Jeremy said earlier about, if you think this is awkward for you, you got to get over yourself, because this is about the athlete. And if you're like, oh my God, this is the worst, I'm so nervous, I'm going to get it wrong. I mean, think about the poor kid across your desk, So regardless of how you identify, regardless of what you think you might be good at, or if you're going to mess up, is check that the minute you take on the coaching role, period. Because you're going to find yourself in a number of conversations like this or like others. But I think too is just, in asking for help, someone in your department is going to know somebody somewhere that can get you there. So if you don't have the answer, tell your kid, I'm going to go get this answer for you. And in the meantime, you come here whenever you need it.
That's awesome. I think that's incredibly well said. Going off of that, have any of you experienced challenges when you approached your administration with this situation? And what would you recommend to somebody that maybe doesn't have a supportive administration or campus?
That's a good question. I think, if the administration isn't supportive, there has to be somewhere, somebody there in the athletic department. But as Amanda said earlier, looking across campus and trying to find out whether there's, your ally center. I know there's, we call it the O here at Tulane, that there's plenty of resources that if you don't have something there on campus, but going in a conversation or trying to have these conversations by yourself, feeling alone, and that's going to make it even more self-isolating, where you're trying to help this athlete and you're looking around and there's no help. So definitely looking across campus, and if there's not, then searching out in the community. I think sometimes it's such a taboo type subject for some people, and it's kind of what Jeremy and Amanda are saying, that people are thinking like, what does that mean for me, instead of thinking, how is this going to best help the athlete? And then if that's not the case, shoot an email to other coaches, whether either going through their social media. That I think that's a way that we can kind of use it to our advantage. There's been players before where I know they've liked certain things, whether it's their interest in poetry and how that kind of aligned with their sexuality, and been able to kind of share some of those things with them that either are happening in town or on campus, that they can kind of get some support there as well.
Awesome. I do think, and I will recommend, obviously we are, most of us are very fortunate that we are working obviously at academic institutions that generally have resources on campus, even if our administrations aren't up to speed. So certainly LGBT centers on campus are a great place to start, as well as though in your communities as well. If you're in a larger community, there's more opportunity, but for sure. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're kind of, our time's flying away. We could talk about this all day. I want to talk team dynamics. So an athlete coming out, that's a process. It's a very individual process that they go through and that we need to support them through. But then there's a whole dynamic with the team, whether the team is accepting or not, or you have some people that are struggling with it, or Amanda, you touched on it a little bit, but team dynamics, let's talk team dynamics, and then we're going to touch on team dating policies. So we'll get onto both of those here. So if anybody wants to start with, what are your thoughts on team dynamics, and are you doing something different in your talks to your team now that you are more aware and sensitive to the fact that you probably have LGBT athletes on your team that haven't come out yet?
Yeah, for me personally at the high school level, I think it all starts with myself and the coaching staff. We want to create a community environment that's all inclusive. And I really do think it's from the top down, and whether that be, maybe someone that's never played the game, or in my case, a transgender that was trying to play, the goal is all the same, right? We compete to win. And if you can create that inclusive community, we set a kind of we have zero tolerance for any kind of hazing, or whether it be a young player or a gay player. I mean, it's just not accepted. And I think if you set that tone right off the bat, that it is an all-inclusive community, because again, I go back to everyone's thumbprint is different. And it's what makes us great as people. It's what makes us great. If we were all the same person on a team, how good would your team really be? We all have different strengths. We all have, different things we bring to the table. So for us, and we've always done it on our coaching staffs, and we've gotten better over the years at it, but we're an all-inclusive community. And it's just really important that kids understand they're safe in this community. And you can talk to us, and you can talk to a teammate. And if we hear this going on over here, then we need to address that right away. I think when kids understand it's not going to be tolerated, and we're in it to win, so for us, that's it. I think it starts with us as head coaches, and it has to trickle down through the program.
That's awesome. I love that. And I smiled, obviously, because I think that's, I couldn't have explained it any better. And I think Amanda was on a call. We were on a panel the other day, and this kind of came up. And I can tell you the one thing that when I was asked, when I first came out in 2005, if I was coaching different now that I was out, and I was like, coaching different? Like, I don't understand. And what I said to the reporter was, look, I have always stressed to our athletes that our diversity is our strength. Our diversity in our talents, our diversity in our skill sets, our diversity in our personalities and our sense of humor, all of that diversity allows us to be more resilient to more different forces that come at us. If we're all the same, then the same challenge that hits us and we all fall back, then we're going to be taken out. So I think it's important that we talk about diversity in all aspects. Makes us a stronger unit. It makes us a stronger team. And I appreciate how you said that. And anyone else, in terms of thinking about the team dynamics, anyone noticed anything that changed with your team dynamics when an athlete came out? Did you see a team get closer or get stronger? What are some things that you've seen?
So I noticed that after one of my athletes at Arizona State who came out as gay, his teammates embraced him fully, and one of his teammates and himself came up to me and suggested hosting a Pride Week, which, I thought was a really cool idea to kind of take into our team, having a Pride Week each year where we, celebrate Pride, where we, wear the colors of the rainbow throughout the part of the week. But yeah, just noticing how accepting teammates have been has been really inspiring, especially with guys.
That's awesome. I know that one of the things that we do commonly see is that every athlete has insecurities, right? It's not just about sexuality. Like, everyone has their fears and their insecurities about what they're living. And I think one of the things that I've seen often, and I am excited that we see it often, is that when we see an athlete or a coach or somebody coming out in an athletic situation, we actually see that team probably have a better year and one of their most successful seasons, because there's a tighter bond and a safety net that allows individuals to be more vulnerable, right? Courage and vulnerability are the same thing. And you cannot have what you call courage, and we want to profess to all of our athletes to be courageous and be strong, but we make vulnerability be this weak thing. But you cannot be courageous if you're not vulnerable. Being courageous means you're putting yourself into what you should be fearing and vulnerable to. And I think when we see athletes or coaches or individuals do that with the LGBT issue, it can really empower the rest of your team that are not LGBT to feel more included, to be more valued, and to feel a little bit safer. And I do think that that is something that is contagious. Let's transition a little bit to, and again, if anybody has any thoughts, don't hesitate to jump in. Inter-team dating. Now you have athletes coming out. If it's a team, you're obviously a same-sex team. Now you're going to have potentially have, if multiple players are out, there might be issues of dating. So interpersonal relationships. I will throw this out there while somebody's thinking about what they want to share. It's very similar to, obviously, Malik, you're in a situation, or Imran, you're in a situation where you coach men and women, right? So they could be men and women on the same team that are dating, that are same-sex, heterosexual. So I don't know that it's dramatically different, but I just think teams that have been one sex have had a hard time dealing with it. So what do you do with inter-team dating? How do you talk about it? Can you ban it? Do you talk about it? What are your thoughts?
I had to unmute myself quick because I have a lot to say on this topic. I think the best way, it's crazy. I've been at 5 universities, and I think it's happened at every single one, and all in different ways. And I think ultimately, really explaining to them what's team time. I heard Nevin Cable speak one time, and she talked a lot about that. What's team time and what's your time. And it's funny because sometimes they act like, you don't know, or, nothing's happening. And really, I think sometimes coaches, we want to get too involved. Is it really affecting anything? And I think that's probably the first thing to evaluate. I'm naturally an observant person. So there's sometimes I'll start to notice dynamics, and I'll ask them to, like, hey, oh, no. So after a while, it finally comes out. And this was quite a few years ago. This was a while ago. And I thought this couple was dating and nobody wanted to tell me. Then after the season was over, they start telling me all these things. So then I start telling them, well, remember this and remember that. So I think it's really talking to them about healthy relationships. I don't like the idea when people say we're going to ban or you can't do it, because again, you're dealing with young kids and they're going to, you say no, and it's just almost enticing to do that. But I think really talking about when it's time to work, it's time to work, and no distractions, in the sense of, like, if you bring it to the court, now we have to deal with it. If you guys are bringing your relationship to the court, now it's all of our problem. And, some of the advice that I've given some of the couples in the past is, we stay out of your business until you make it our business. And that really has worked, and knock on wood, really haven't had, especially lately, any really drama with it. But early on, a few other places, it would be drama just because they would bring it into there. So really talking about the healthy relationships of it. And again, we're not trying to tell you what you can and can't do. We'll stay out of your business, provided it doesn't get in our team time.
I think that's great, Doshia, and I think it's well said. I know we've often seen a lot of programs where, and it got even highly publicized, where, coaches would say, ban it, or say no, or you're not allowed. And the one thing that always concerned me with that was, that they're going to be dating behind your back then. So all you're setting yourself up is to be a coach that is being deceived to, because it's going to happen. So to me, it kind of was from an ego standpoint, I don't want my athletes to ever feel like it's okay to ever kind of violate a rule. And if I make a rule that I know they're going to violate, I'm actually setting myself up to look bad and not effective as a leader. But I do think at the end of the day, it comes down to healthy relationships. Whether you have a roommate that doesn't clean the kitchen and the dishes are in the sink, and you bring that to the court, well, that's an unhealthy relationship that's got to stay off the court as well, right? So it's not just about dating. I think healthy relationships and understanding team time and what the value of that team time is really important. That's great. I know that Dawn Ennis, editor with Outsports, brought up a point about, we don't have a lot of trans coaches out there, and our ability to encourage our trans athletes that we're now seeing, hopefully to start seeing more of those athletes be able to stay into coaching, because I do think that role models are really important, right? Visibility is really important. And for our trans athlete, they don't really have any role models at all when it comes to coaching. And I certainly feel like that is something that we hopefully will see in the next decade, that we'll see much more trans coaches in there. Anybody have any thoughts on that, or know of athletes that were trans that are interested in coaching?
I don't specifically, but honestly, what that made me just think of, so when I first did the panel with the NFCA with Kirk a couple weeks ago, I reached out to my trans student athlete and I just said, what would you want to share? Like, what are things I don't know? What are positives, the good, the bad, the ugly? And one of the things he brought up, that he said, this could just be a good thing to throw out there for people to think about when you find yourself with trans athletes, is what he wasn't expecting, almost like mourning the loss of the sport he had played his whole life, because he put his full transition on hold to finish competing. And so, like he said, I mean, your last collegiate game is hard. It always is for everybody. But then realizing that as he fully transitioned, he'd find himself talking about softball. Everyone's like, geez, how do you know all this? And he was like, oh my God, my sister plays, panic, not thinking of all that, And so I guess, I don't know if I have an answer for your question, but I wonder is it just love of the game and wanting to, or is it bridging that gap and feeling comfortable and not necessarily having to be labeled as a transgender? I mean, I know my athlete is fully transitioned and is fully passing now. And so we've had the conversation of how do we know each other going forward? Because I'm guessing you don't want to be a softball player from UMSL for the rest of your life, And so I wonder if it's just feeling like they can't continue to coach because the identification with the sport, or if it's just simply, the path you choose. But I certainly feel like the more we have this dialogue, the more comfortable everybody is going to be with all of it, with athletes coming out, with embracing it, and then with the encouragement to take the next step and possibly still stay engaged.
Wow, that's great stuff. I can't say enough about what we've been talking about here. We have 3 minutes left, and I want to be able to have each one of you have a few minutes, or a few seconds, I guess 30 seconds maybe, to kind of share anything, final thoughts, anything you'd like to share with the coaches out there that are listening and watching on how they can feel more empowered to move forward and help their student athletes. So whoever wants to jump in first, if someone's got closing thoughts.
I would just say it's really up to us and especially the coaches in my world of football. You got to have an open mind. And if we preach about loving kids and supporting, it's all kids. And I really think, listen to kids. I think Amanda said it earlier, maybe it was Doshia. Kids are smart. We don't give them enough credit. So please listen. The signs are there. The conversations are there. They need our support. So, at one point, I was a closed-minded coach early on. I can tell you right now, after 25 years, I'm not anymore, and we're here to support kids. So please be open-minded, and please, please, please get involved and educate yourselves before you speak out against anything.
Oh, thank you. Jeremy, thank you for being here. Imran, what do you have?
I think for us, we are bigger than just our sport, right? We can spend all week, all day coaching whatever sport that we're coaching, but there's so much more that goes into that, the well-being of our athletes and ourselves. So making sure that we take the time to understand our athletes with their mental health and everything that's going on, and then in general just educating ourselves in everything going on, whether it be social justice or LGBTQ history, anything like that. It's our job to educate ourselves and inspire our athletes as their leader.
Awesome. Doshia.
I know both Jeremy and I was going to call you Malik because Kurt said it earlier, but wait, say it one more time.
Imran.
Imran. See, I'm sorry. But you guys use the word educate, and I think for me as somebody that has these intersections, right, being a female, being Black, being lesbian, all of these intersections, and obviously the social issues being in terms of racism being a hot topic, people are really doing their job to educate themselves, and there's been a lot of resources and allies come out, and I think allies are working both ways, right? Not just in when we're dealing with student athletes and these young people, I think it's important for us as coaches, we have a huge responsibility to educate ourselves on all of the issues that they could be that they could be facing, and this is their grown-up time. So I think it's important, not just in, whether it's their sexuality, whether it's the social things, whether it's, whatever it is that they're dealing with, we have a responsibility to educate ourselves to help them navigate that space.
Awesome. Thank you. Amanda.
Yes, 30 seconds. I think that we have to take it upon ourselves to create this safe space, because we might just be the one safe space they have. And I think it's just being willing to know that you don't have to be perfect. No one's asking you to be. They're just asking you to be present and be vulnerable to help. And then I would say create a culture that you yourself would want to live in, whatever that means. I got to go to work every day, and I love going to work every day. And part of it is because I know I've built a culture with freaking cool humans. And the ones that aren't, get them out of here, I think we picked this job because we love this age. I mean, Jeremy, God bless you, dealing with high school. He probably thinks that of us at college, but it's such a transformative time across the board. And to me, it's a blank canvas, and just really work. If you think this feels hard, just pick one thing and write some notes and think of some inclusive language. Think about things you commonly say, and you hear sometimes like, here we go, ladies. You don't have to ask, hey, do you have a boyfriend? Hey, do you have a partner? Are you dating anyone? We use the word human a lot. Just little things like that. Start small, get control of your culture there, and then get your people in, and then you can branch out, because pretty soon your people are going to become people in your department. And then there are resources across the board for your entire department in your university, no one's asking us to move mountains,
Awesome.
Yeah, so anyway, I'd also like to offer too, if anyone needs any help or resources, specifically with dealing with trans, is don't be afraid to reach out, or my athlete has offered that as well. So reach out to Kirk or anything you need. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I'm just thrilled. We got to do another round because we got a ton of questions we didn't even get to, but thank you all. Thank you everyone for listening and being a part, and take care of your athletes, take care of yourself, be kind. I love when Ellen says that, and we can do a lot of great things if we just kind of open up our hearts and be vulnerable and care. Thank you everybody. Enjoy your evening, and take care.